Hello everyone, welcome to our little Facebook webinar this morning, or I guess it's this afternoon. Sorry about those technical difficulties, sometimes that happens when you do live broadcast. This is Ann Mitchell, I work here at Ancestry.com, and today's topic is we're going to do a brief introduction, how to find your Civil War roots at Ancestry.com. Everyone assumes they have someone who participated in the Civil War. It involved millions of men and women. We lost 600,000 people in that particular war. The fact is that it probably touched one of your families somewhere along the line if they lived in this country in the 1860s. And what I would like to do today is just sort of walk you through a process on how you can identify people in your tree who may have served, and then start you on your way to figuring out what they might have done. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get organized. And if you're like me, sometimes it's fun just to sort of dive in and see what you can find. But in this particular case, when you're trying to identify who might have been a soldier in the Civil War, it's probably a better idea to get yourself a little bit organized. You may have someone specific you're looking for. There's a family legend that you've heard that you would like to investigate. Or maybe you just want to know whoever was there. But we want to dig up the facts so that you can tell the story of who was in the war. All right, so where do we begin? The first place you want to begin is by looking through your tree and identifying the most likely candidates. Most likely they were men. There were some women who fought, but that was far and few between. They were most likely born between the years 1816 and 1846. However, that doesn't mean that someone born after 1846 or before 1816 didn't fight, and if you suspect that that's true, you should keep looking. Also, it's good to find people who were in the 1860 census. If they were in the U.S., then you have an idea of where they lived and what states they probably fought for. So let's start with our family tree. I like to start with Family Tree Maker because it has some really nice filtering techniques that you can use. First, let me go back here. Down here at the bottom under the names, you'll see filter. If you press that, it'll come up with a screen. And that screen will allow you to throw everybody in, and then we'll filter people out. So I would click on include all. That throws everybody in, and it'll look something like this. Now I'm going to click on exclude, and then I will exclude all women. So I will set that up. Then I'm going to exclude everyone born before 1818 or 1816, whatever you decide to go with. Then I will exclude everyone born after 1846. Now I have a lot of people in my tree, so when I do that, it filters them quite down to a smaller number, and I now have 356 men in my tree born between 1818 and 1846. Now, you may just want to start with your direct line, so there are different ways you could do that as well. All right, so here's the basic framework that I'm going to suggest that you use. First, examine your tree. Then, organize your family data, and I'll give you some tips on how to do that. Then we're going to gather the likely suspects. We're going to pick someone, and then we're going to gather their brothers and cousins. This was usually not an individual effort. Usually men, when they volunteered, they often went with someone else to volunteer. So you'll often find their neighbors, their brothers, their cousins fighting in the same unit that they fought in. Then we need to figure out which side did they fight for, so we know where to look for records. Then we can start searching for records. And then as you find each record, you should summarize and update what you know, and then start to create the story of this particular soldier's adventure in the Civil War. All right, so let's look at our family tree. And here I'm using screenshots from Family Tree Maker. This also works on Ancestry's member trees or any other desktop software that you might have. But I just walk up and down my direct line back and forth and look at each of my great-grandfathers, in my particular case, or great-great-grandfathers, to see who might have been in the Civil War. Jeremiah seems like a very likely candidate. He was born in 1826. He lived in Virginia, so he would be someone that I would go look for. I also I know that he is in the 1860 census and the 1870 census. You really do want to find both. If he's not in the 1870 census, he probably didn't live through the war. And then you would want to start looking for things like widow's pensions. And if he is in 1870, you know he survived. Also look at his children. Is there a gap between 1860 and 1865 or somewhere in there? If he wasn't around, chances are good that he may have been in the war, and that's why there were no children in that break. All right, I'm a big fan of spreadsheets. I like to get all my data organized. So now I'm going to organize my family data. So, and you can create a spreadsheet to suit your own needs. This is just what I do. I do the first name and the last name. I would also include nicknames if they're used a lot for this person. I've often seen my great-grandfather Jeremiah listed as Jer or Jerry, so I might put that in as well. Where did he live in 1860? Where did he live in 1870? When was he born? I like to put down what age he was in 1861 and 1865. That helps me do a reality check on whether I think he would have been in the war. Also, birth years of children born between 1860 and 1865. Now, if he had a child born in 1862 and then another one in 1866, I would probably look for his record somewhere in between there. All right, so I'll spare you the tedium of going through my entire tree, but this is what I gathered. I go through and I pull everybody who I think might be a likely candidate in my direct line. That's who I'm going to start with. So I have all of these gentlemen. Some of them I don't think are very likely, but you never know, right? You just never know. So all of these should be examined. For this particular example, I'm going to start with James Calvin Donald, because I know where his records are and it's a better example to show you. So I'm going to pull him out. I'm also going to pull out his brothers because I want to see if any of them may have served, so I can search for them if I'm having trouble finding James, and then see if he served with them. He had a brother named John who was born in 1839, very likely candidate, got married after the war. Benjamin, 1841, also a likely candidate, got married, or never got married. Robert Donald, he was born in 1845, which would have made him 16. He's a little young to have enlisted right at the beginning of the war, but I do want to look for records later on because he might have gone and enlisted. Because he lived in Virginia, he probably was with the Confederacy, and as the war went on, they pulled more and more people in because they were running out of soldiers. Samuel and Matthew seem really young at 14 and 9, so I really don't think they ever served, and as it turns out, they did not. All right. So which side do they fight for? Here's a list of the Union states, but just because someone lived in the Union doesn't mean, or is one of the Union states, doesn't mean they fought for the Confederacy and vice versa. You never know, and you should always go look. And this is also family legends. Those things tend to filter down, so you may want to keep those in mind. The Confederate states, they're pretty obvious, but again, especially up near the borders, people tended to fight on both sides. And generally, the border states are Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and West Virginia. So there, you're going to have to look definitely on both sides. All right, step 6. Let's see what we can find. So, I know where he was born, 1836 in Virginia. I know he lived in Rockbridge in 1860, and I know he died in 1899. So where I'm going to go to start searching for Civil War records is our military page. And if you go to Ancestry.com, military records, or if you go up to our navigation bar and you mouse over search, you'll see military records. That will also take you to the military page. I'm going to click on the Civil War tab, and then I can enter in all my information, and then I can do a search. What this does for you is it takes all of the data collections we've got, because you know we have over 30,000 now, and it will pull the ones that are specific to the Civil War. So you can start digging into those. You may want to do them each individually, but this gives you a big global search for just Civil War records. So, what I suggest that you start with after you get this search is you look in either the U.S. Civil War soldier records and profiles or American Civil War soldiers. These are collections of a lot of different data sources out there, and they will give you information that should help you identify what company and what regiment that your soldier may have served with, so you can go track them down that way. I got pretty lucky with James Calvin Donald. It brings up the U.S. Civil War soldier records, and you're not always going to get this lucky, but This is a canned example, so there you go. He lived in Lexington, Virginia. That sounds like my guy. His occupation was he was a laborer. Make sure that you check all these things and don't make assumptions. My great-grandfather here was a cooper who made barrels. That would be considered a laborer. Age at enlistment, 24, and he enlisted April 20th, 1861, which is about 2 days after Virginia seceded from the nation. So this is all starting to look like the right thing, and he served Virginia. So it has here that he was in 3 different regiments: the 4th Infantry, the 7th Cavalry, and the 14th Cavalry. I will need to go check compiled service records for each of these so that I can find what his life was like during the war. A few other things that I'm lucky enough to get in this. I get a description of him. I don't have any pictures of him, but this suddenly I've got a visual image of what he might look like. He was 5'9", he was fair, blue eyes, light hair. It tells me his birth date and it tells me his death date. So this is all pretty exciting. Now, you might, in your excitement, attach and move on. I suggest you don't. Update your spreadsheet and put in the information. These units are really important finding other records. So I would put that information in. And I also put in the enlistment dates and the muster out dates so I know where they might have served, when they were in that particular unit. Then I write a summary of what I'm reading here so that I have it, because I'm trying to put together a story of James in the Civil War. Now, here's a really convenient place to put this. You can either put it in Family Tree Maker or you can put it in your online tree. This is an underused portion, I think, of our online tree. So let me show you where it is. If you're on what we call the person page, which gives you the timeline and other information, you'll see an add a story link. That's what that little orange arrow is pushing right there. If I click on that, it will say I can add a new story. And there's 2 ways I can add the story. I can either just write the story here, or I can put it in a Word document or some other type of document and upload it. For this example, I'm just going to put it here in the text. So I say I want to write a story, I give a title to it, and then I can type in whatever makes me happy, and I've got, I can change the font, bullets, bold, all the things to make it a little bit more readable. Down here at the bottom, I could put the location and I can put the date so it shows up in the appropriate place. I can also attach it to relevant people. I may want to attach it to his brothers if I find out they served in the same unit. I may want to attach it to his wife and his children. Then, when I come over here to the page, I've got the story where I can review or add to it. So now I have a place where I can keep writing my story. Also, when you add in records, it's easy enough just to add in records and leave the label that's there and not say anything. But you can also add a description. All right, now maybe this description isn't the most meaningful, James Calvin Donald's Civil War enlistment record, but I can go put in anything I want here. So here I say that he enlisted 3 days after Virginia left the Union. So he was ready to go. I save that, and now I've got a little snippet here that explains what I'm finding in this particular record. If you bring out the important parts of each record you attach and put them in your timeline, you'll find when you go back and look at the timeline of this person, you have a better understanding of who they were. Also, if you're trying to get your family interested in it, it makes it a little bit more meaningful than just the list of records. It's something you might want to try. All right. So, I've got this enlistment record, so what can I do with it now? All right, so I want to be able to click on Company H or Company Preston's, click through on one of those and see what I can find. And hopefully our technical difficulties are over and this will actually work. Load. It did work. Life is good. All right, so here we go. He was in the 4th Infantry. Its organization date was 24 April 1861. So I'm going to click here on View Record. And what I see here, and this is, if you want to go directly to this data collection, it's the American Civil War regiments. And we have it for all the Civil War regiments on both sides. It tells the date of organization and the muster out date. What I'm looking at here is Gettysburg after battle report. So it goes through everything that happened with this particular regiment during the Gettysburg battle. And you can read through this. You can pick out things that you think are pertinent, put them in your story if you like. And then it goes on and it goes on. And here's the part that I think you may be interested in. I am quite sure, if you're looking for your Civil War veterans, that you've read more than one Civil War book. It's just a fascinating time in American history. And you want to know what part your soldier, your ancestors played in that. And this is a list of battles fought. Now we know, if you go back to the spreadsheet, that this was the regiment that he enlisted with, and then he mustered out in 1862. So I know that it's only these first set of battles with this particular regiment that he fought. So he was at Manassas or Bull Run. Depending on the side of the war you were in, they were called two different things. Often the Union named them after bodies of water, rivers, creeks, those kind of things, and the Confederates named them after a close town. Not always true, but just something to remember. So he was at Manassas, or the Battle of Bull Run. Also here at Kernstown. He was with other regiments, so I'll have to go look those up. Now, if we click through here, this tells you what this particular regiment, what that battle was like. So I can read through this and get a sense of what was going on there. So this gives me an idea of what was happening with this particular unit. So this can be useful in helping build the story of what your soldier was doing. All right. Whoops. Here we go. Okay, so that is one thing that you want to do. You want to go through and you want to track the battles. What are the other types of records that you want to look for? You want to start with the U.S. Federal Census for 1860 and 1870. You want to know where they lived. You want to know if they survived the war. You also want to look and see in 1870, are there extra children in the family that you don't believe are the children of the parents in the family? Oftentimes, if parents died during the war, or if they can't support them anymore, they would go to live with relatives. So you want to look for that. Did the wife change? Did she die? Did some of the children die? Keep track of how the family changes, because most families suffered greatly during the war. Find enlistment and service records, regiment records. Look for prisoner of war records. This will tell you if they were captured and put in one of the prison camps. These were just horrible places to be, whether you were in the Union or the Confederacy. They were not great places, and a lot of prisoners died. Pension records. These are really useful in learning new details about your ancestors. Note that U.S. pension records were only given to soldiers who fought for the Union, because they were not the rebels, and you will find those in the U.S. records. For the Confederacy, often the states would give pensions to their particular soldiers, so you will need to look state by state. Death records. Death records may also be able to tell you some new details, and if they were buried in a military cemetery or it's recorded with the federal government, you may have some pointers to where your soldier was buried. Local histories and family histories. This was a time in our nation's history where a lot was written afterwards. So you may be able to find a local history or family history that talks about, in that particular town or county, who actually went to fight, what was life like at that time, those kind of things. Newspapers. This will give you a sense of what it was like and what was going on and what people were thinking in that particular area. We often tend to judge the Civil War in our own context, but that's not how it was judged back then. So you really do want to go get a feel for what life was like between 1860 and 1870. All right, so you probably also want to go look at Fold 3. Fold 3 is a sister site of ours, and it is a military site. That is its main focus. But that's a subject for another day. So I want to leave it at that, and just let me go back up here. Just remind you of the steps that you should go through. Well, at least the steps that I'm going to recommend that you go through. There we go. All right, here's the framework for searching. Examine your family tree. You want to find all of the people who may have served. Organize your family data. Create some sort of spreadsheet or whatever form you like, and start to enter all the relevant facts that will help you locate them in the records. Gather the likely suspects. Figure out who you want to go searching for first. Pick someone and gather their brothers and cousins, or maybe even their neighbors. You never know who they went and fought with. Figure out which side they fought for so you know where to look for records. Start searching for records. If you look in our Civil War tab, it's a great place to do an initial search. As you attach records, summarize and update what you know. The little details can help you find other records, and then you should update your story. I suggest that you come up with a story and you save it someplace, and if it's someplace accessible, then you can share it with your other family members or other people who might be researching this particular soldier. I hope this was helpful, and if you have more questions about the Civil War, if you go and you look on the Learning Center, you will be able to go to our article archives, and we have different Civil War columns. You can also send your questions to ask@ancestry.com. Just put Civil War in the subject line so I know what it's about, and we'll see if we don't pick some of your questions and maybe put them in one of our Civil War columns. It's been a pleasure talking to you all today, and we'll see you again soon on our Facebook channel.